Okay. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Amy Rosenfeld. You are here for Cooking for Reducing Disease Risk, part 2 of our series. This is our cancer portion. I am a registered dietitian working at Northern Westchester Hospital, part of Northwell Health in Mount Kisco, New York. Brought to you from our Center for Healthy Living programs. This is our virtual hub for all education. It's nice to see some of you back in the Zoom room today and to be joining me on this beautiful fall day. A few different things today. I will be talking a lot about reducing your risk for cancer, as well as showing 2 different recipes. I will be moving my camera up and down, so as I'm cooking, you can see my hands and what exactly that I'm doing. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A function. When the camera is down, if I don't get to your question right away, as soon as I'm able to, I will definitely look at it. I encourage you to ask questions, and I will try to answer them in real time as best I possibly can. If you are cooking along, I'm gonna give a little bit of an introduction. It's a good time to have your recipes out in front of you. You should have had your recipes emailed to you. You should have received it from our email address, chl@northwell.edu. If for any reason you did not, you can put your email in the chat and I'll be sure to email them to you after the fact. So another couple of other business items. If you see as we go along, we're going to have Zoom polls pop up on your screen. When you see that, I invite you to participate. We're going to have some trivia questions there, some questions. It's a great way to engage and participate in the webinar. And yes, so welcome. So happy so many of you could join me today. Let's see, there we go. Okay, all right. So our conversation is going to start with talking about cancer and a little bit about risk. This is a prevention program, so talking a little bit about the screening information that everybody needs to know, as well as talking about the American Cancer Society recommendations. So what I'm going to be doing today is a culinary program, taking a lot of that nutrition information and that jargon, which can be kind of difficult to decipher, and bring it into your kitchen and put it into real terms and how you can actually apply it to your everyday life. And then I'm going to be demonstrating 2 different recipes today. I'm going to be making a pumpkin turkey chili and an apple dessert bowl. So very autumnal and seasonal for today. Lots of smells going on in my kitchen. I always wish I had some smell-o-vision because it's a very fragrant group of recipes we're making today. All right, so the first thing that I always want to advocate, yes, I'm a registered dietitian, but I'm also a health educator. And I think it's very important for everybody to realize some of our basic screening information. Now, this is general screening information for the general public, not for somebody at necessarily increased risk or in a specific category. So if you fit into one of those higher risk categories, I recommend speaking to your physician always about what screening is best for you, and always, no matter what, talking about what screening is best for you with your doctor. But generally speaking, this is what the American Cancer Society recommends. Early detection is key. So going to the doctor and finding out information, while it may be scary, it can help save your life. So it's definitely important for everyone to know. Women ages 40 to 44, time to schedule your first mammogram, colorectal screening, which is getting a colonoscopy starting at age 40. Cervical cancer, which is going to your doctor and getting your annual pap smear from your GYN, starting at age 25. Lung cancer screening is a little more specific for somebody with a history of smoking, and a little bit more specific criteria, ages 50 to 80, definitely something to look into. Prostate cancer screening for your gentlemen out there, annual PSA test starting at ages 40 to 55. And for everybody, even from a young age, teenage years, starting with skin cancer screening, annual skin checks to assess further testing. And there are tons of other screening, but these are the general ones the American Cancer Society recommends. And I encourage you all, it is perfectly safe to seek screening from either Northern Westchester Hospital or your local hospital, local facility, to make sure that you are ensuring early detection. And now the focus of our program is all about nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle, and how that can help you to reduce your risk of cancer. So here are the general recommendations, and we're going to dive into this today of how they apply to the kitchen and how exactly this works. Recommendation number 1 from the American Cancer Society: a healthy eating pattern includes foods that are high in nutrients in amounts that help you get to and stay at a healthy body weight. And we're going to dive into what that means. Recommendation 2, a healthy eating pattern limits or does not include red and processed meats, sugar-sweetened beverages, highly processed foods, and refined grain products. And recommendation 3, which many of you might find very unpopular: it is best not to drink alcohol. No more than 1 drink per day for women or 2 drinks per day for men. And we are going to get into all of this. But before I do so, I'd like to launch our first poll and see how everybody feels about this. So poll number 1, preparing plant-based meals is intimidating. How does everybody feel about this question? Not at all, somewhat intimidating, or definitely intimidating? How are you guys feeling today? I see a lot of mixed messages here. I'm going to give everyone a minute just to give their answer, but a lot of all over the map here. All right, get your final polls in, and let's see what everybody said. So some majority of you said it's somewhat intimidating, 10% of you said it's definitely intimidating, and a good portion of you said not at all. So we're on the good track here. All right, good. That helps me to test the waters, see what everybody is feeling today. More polls later. Oh, actually, no, I have one more. Just kidding. All right, so we're gonna launch this poll. True or false? Choosing to be plant-based, even just sometimes, improves your health. True or false? What do you guys think? True or false? Choosing to be plant-based, even just sometimes, improves your health. All right, let's see what everybody says. Okay. All right, so the majority of you said true. Okay, more on this later. Thank you so much for participating. Okay, so let's dive into the recommendation. So recommendation number 1 is a healthy eating pattern. And for those of you who joined in session 1 about heart disease, you've seen this picture before, and it is vitally important that we refer to it, but we're going to refer to it in a little bit of a different way this round. So healthy eating plate, this is the healthy eating plate from, the Harvard School of Public Health. It's a little bit more of an evolved version of the My Plate brought out by our government. So the healthy eating plate, we want to fill half our plate full of fruits and vegetables, the majority of which vegetables, and we're going to talk about how to do that today. A quarter of your plate, and by the way, when we talk about this plate, we're talking about a 9-inch plate. We're not talking about a 12-inch dinner plate. We're referring to a 9-inch plate, which is commonly associated in America with a salad plate. That was the original plate before plates became 12 inches big. So we are talking about a 9-inch plate when we're talking about portions and references to this. A quarter of your plate being whole grains. That could also be a starchy vegetable included in there. Whole grains, we're going to talk about the differences and some ideal choices. And then healthy protein. And we're also going to talk about what options to choose here, whether it be plant-based or meat-based, and what choices to have, as well as an abundance of healthy fats coming from plant-based sources, and water and activity, which we're going to talk all about today. All right, so the first portion of that was eating foods that are high in nutrients. Okay, so when we refer to nutrients, we're talking about the words vitamins, minerals, which is our micronutrients, and then our macronutrients, which is our fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. So the foods that are higher in nutrients are the less processed. So what does that mean? That means whole foods, foods that have not been taken to a manufacturing plant or have been processed and put into anything in any other way, that are naturally occurring, such as fruit growing on the tree, or chicken from an animal, not a processed meat. And we're going to talk about how to make this happen. But when we talk about foods that are highest in nutrients, we're talking about whole foods in terms of foods that you would find mostly on the majority of the perimeter of the store and that are in their original form, that haven't been adjusted in any way. And there are some exceptions to that, which I will talk a lot about today. In amounts to help you get to and stay at a healthy body weight. So these are some real life pictures of what a 9-inch plate in proportion look like. So the My Plate helps us give like a grand perspective, but most of us aren't putting things into 4 different quadrants. This is a real life image. So when you look at this image and you look at the majority, the superstars on both of these plates that pop out at you are the color. And the color are coming from our fruits and vegetables. So most of these, I believe, are just vegetables from what I can see. So we have a plate of grilled chicken and some brown rice, but in largest abundance, we see a plate of tomatoes and grilled peppers and zucchini and broccoli, and they are the main focus. And there is not one vegetable choice. There's multiple vegetable choices in different colors. We're going to talk about that. And the bottom line is when you follow the plate method and you're eating in these proportions, you are eating in a way that helps us to maintain a healthy body weight. And overall, what the American Cancer Society recommends and what research has shown is reducing cancer risk is correlated strongly with maintaining a healthy body weight within the recommended BMI of 19 to 25. Now, as I talked about in the last class, I'm a firm advocate and believer in health at the movement and the way of practice of health at every size. And there is movement in that where, you know, within a healthy body weight for you based on your background and your body weight and your needs may be different than another individual. That being said, also, if you are considered overweight, you can also maintain a healthy lifestyle. But the purpose of this class in interpreting the American Cancer Society recommendations is that the majority of the research indicates that the lowest risk for cancer is associated with a healthy body weight. And eating in this portion of quarter of your plate whole grains, the majority of your plate fruits and vegetables, and a quarter of your plate healthy protein is an ideal way to achieve that. And then, of course, on the plate is staying active. It's a very key part of the American Cancer Society's recommendations. Move more, sit less. If you can exercise 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity, that means you can carry a conversation, but you're maybe breaking a little sweat, you're getting your heart rate up, or less of time, but a more intense. Maybe you can't carry on a conversation, your heart rate is elevated, 75 to 150 minutes of what they call vigorous intensity activity. So running, cycling, swimming, things that are going to really intentionally get your heart rate up. And I always say to people, it's also just about how much you move. Sitting is the new smoking in terms of risk for chronic disease. So the more we walk, taking 10,000 steps a day is the goal. If you have a step counter, an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, anything that helps to track your steps can really help you to achieve that goal. But sitting less, having a standing desk, standing instead of sitting as much as possible, walking somewhere, taking the stairs, all of this helps to fit into an overall active lifestyle. So the healthy diet in the pattern in the kitchen. So taking that, how do we have the foods that are highest in nutrients? How do we have foods that are within the plate method? That's really, according to the American Cancer Society and multiple research across different studies, is following what we call a plant-based diet. A plant-based diet means foods that are mostly coming from plants. It used to be referred to as a vegan diet, and that's still definitely a connotation, but I like to think of the word plant-based as more of either flexitarian or partly meatless. There are, of course, many people who are strict vegans, and power to you if you can follow a diet that is solely plant-based. But I think for the majority of us, following a diet that is flexitarian, so partially involves animal products and mostly is concentrated in plants, the majority of what you eat coming from plants, choosing areas of protein that are from legumes such as beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, tempeh, peas as your main sources of protein. And maybe that means that you are doubling your vegetables and having your meats in recipes, which we're going to do today with our chili recipe. Or that means that sometimes per week, you eat meatless for the day or meatless meals per week, and generally start to swap in a little bit of those plant-based meals and plant-based proteins, and maybe reduce your meat by swapping in some of those plant-based proteins. And of course, focusing on fruits and vegetables as your main event. So the American Cancer Society recommends 2.5 to 3 cups of vegetables per day, 1.5 to 2 cups of fruit per day. So that's a large amount of our nutrients and our calories coming from vegetables and fruits. And how do we do that? How do we eat more fruits and vegetables? So I like to tell everybody from, young preschoolers all the way to senior citizens, think eating the rainbow. Those pictures that we saw of those beautiful plates that were full of different colors, that's ideally what we want. We want to not just throw vegetables on the plate as an afterthought. We want to make it the main event. If it's the majority of our plate, we have to reframe our thinking a little bit, especially as Americans, to think of the vegetables and the fruits on our plate as the main dish. The fruits and vegetables are not the accompaniment. They are the main dish. They should have most of our focus, not the afterthought that we throw on. So make them vibrant and interesting. And the more vibrant and interesting, there was a question that came through in registration about kids. The more vibrant and colorful your plates are, the more enticing it is to children all the way through adults, because we eat with our eyes. So having more vibrant colors and variety, as well as including those other colors, black, white, and gray. Mushrooms, for example, or gray vegetable, they're wonderfully nutrient rich, and they are a great substitute for meat in a lot of our plant-based eating. White cauliflower, even white potatoes in moderation are loaded with nutrients, and they can be a great thing to include in your diet. Having more frozen fruits and vegetables as a way to accompany the fresh fruits and vegetables is more realistic, especially for those of us who are busy working. Doubling the vegetables and having the meat. It's a strategy I tell people all the time when you're ordering in or when you're making your own dish. Instead of, if you're making chicken with broccoli, think about double the broccoli and half the chicken, maybe substituting in some tofu instead of all extra chicken to make a little bit more of a plant-based meal, and make it easy for yourself. Have raw fruits and vegetables, roasted vegetables, ready to go in the refrigerator, have vegetables in smoothies, fruit purees and baking, any way you can incorporate it into your diet. So then plant-based tips to really get started. Don't think of it as this like overarching lifestyle that we have to switch to plant-based. It's a lifestyle change. So go one meal at a time, one dish at a time, a couple of recipes at a time to incorporate in and maybe reduce the amount of meat or animal products that you're having. Go nuts for nuts and seeds. And we're going to cook with those today, incorporating them into your diet as much as you can as a substitute for maybe a more processed snack, or instead of using traditional flour, using a nut flour, topping your salads instead of with croutons to mix in some seeds. Great way to get some more plant-based protein and nutrients into your diet. When you're cooking, especially now we're getting into soup season and stew season, think beans and lentils to incorporate into your curries and stews and meats instead of meats, and to incorporate them into soups and chilies and things like that. It's a really great way, especially if you're not really that big into beans and lentils. It's a really great way to get started, to puree the beans and lentils into your soups, because you don't really taste them, and it actually thickens your soups similarly to how heavy cream or half and half would. So it's a great way to incorporate that plant-based protein without actually tasting it. Using tofu or edamame instead of chicken in your stir fry. And I'm a big fan of bulking up with mushrooms and eggplant because they're more of a meatier vegetable. They have more of that meaty substantive taste. And we're going to do that today in our chili as well. And swapping out dairy for dairy alternatives. I'm a big fan of oat milk or nut-based milks if you're able to have them in your house as well. So if you are to choose animal proteins, what does the American Cancer Society recommend? So if you are to choose animal proteins, the American Cancer Society recommends fish and poultry as your dominant sources of protein. And when you think of portions, you hold up your hand and you think of the palm of your hand as your portion. That's a portion in terms of thickness and width of what a piece of chicken or fish would be. Eggs, of course, also are a wonderful thing to include in your diet. No more than 5 or 6 yolks per week, and thinking less about cheese when substituting for meat, because they do have a lot of the same properties of if you are going plant-based as a red meat. So you want to reduce the amount of cheese that you're having and instead focus on roasting, grilling, sauteing, braising, air frying, all those healthy methods of poultry, fish, and eggs. And then when you think oils, you want to think less about the animal-based oils like butter, but you want to think more of healthy oils like olive oil, canola oil, avocado oils, sesame oils. Those are the really rich plant-based oils that have a ton of nutrition in them that, again, are going to increase our nutrients. The more nutrients we intake, the lower our cancer risk. So that's a huge piece of it, and not to be afraid of it, to have slices of avocado on your food or incorporate olive oil into a nice healthy salad dressing. Those are wonderful for you to prevent chronic disease of all forms. And then when you're choosing whole grains, you want to think the less processed, the better. So while a whole grain pasta or a whole grain wheat bread is fabulous, it's much better than white bread, the gold standard would be the less processed grains because they're going to have more nutrition. The more, I'll give you an example. When you cook with oatmeal, the more processed the oatmeal, so going from steel cut oats to old fashioned oats to instant oats, the more processing you have, the less nutrient it contains. So when you have more nutrition from a whole unprocessed grain like oatmeal or barley, quinoa, that hasn't been incorporated into a product or gone through a lot of packaging to incorporate into another thing, you're really going to increase your nutrient level. So substitute whole grains for white grains like a white bread or white pasta, things like that. But also think about adding grains in significantly reduces your risk of colorectal cancer to have that rich fiber from whole grains. So adding grains to soups and stews, if you're making a fried rice or a rice pilaf, substitute out the white rice for the brown rice and maybe mix in a different variety. I like to, for my family, mix, say, a quinoa with a barley with a brown rice and make a pilaf with it. So it's not just a quinoa, which I know my little 3-year-old won't eat just quinoa alone, but he'll eat it when it's mixed together. And then it's a real win-win for everybody. And try to mix in different flours. There are lots of different flours you can choose from these days, from quinoa flour to rice flour to just straight up whole grain flour to enrich your baking. Mixing oats into your baked goods and even into your smoothies. Oats do not have to be cooked for you to enjoy them. I mix raw oatmeal, old-fashioned oatmeal into my son's peanut butter banana smoothie for breakfast, and he loves it. Snacking on air pop popcorn is also a great way to get a really rich whole grain, especially if it's one that you're popping yourself on the stove. All right, so let's get started with our first recipe here. And I'm going to tilt my camera down. Let me just make sure I don't see any questions coming through. I don't right now. So this is our first recipe here. It's a pumpkin turkey chili. When we talk about whole unprocessed foods, this is a really great example of how we can do that using poultry instead of red meat, as well as using fresh ingredients, incorporating tons of vegetables. I've reduced the amount of meat in this recipe and substituted in our black beans for more legumes. My family doesn't particularly like pure vegetarian chili, so this is a really nice compromise. I double the beans and I still have that meaty flavor with the turkey. I also want to mention that I'm using 2 packaged products that are perhaps an easier way to incorporate more vegetables in, but it's an exception to the rule of something being better for you if it's whole and unprocessed. So one of those ingredients is pumpkin puree. All right. So pumpkin puree, so pure canned pumpkin, is one of the best things that I always have in my pantry. Of course, it is very seasonal, very autumnal. I wanted to give you a way to incorporate in pumpkin in a different way from making a pumpkin muffin or pumpkin pancakes is a great way to incorporate it into your seasonal cooking, especially if you have any left over from baking. This is a good one. But pure pumpkin puree, all that's in there is pumpkin. So when you're looking for a packaged food that's a convenience food, if it only has ingredients like that you understand and it only has 1 or 2 ingredients, say canned pumpkin, pumpkin puree, or beans, black beans, those are okay. Those are processed foods that are okay and good choices to make your life a little easier. Similarly, I'm using diced tomatoes. I don't have time to chop 1 million tomatoes. I was already chopping 1 million vegetables for today. So to chop up that many tomatoes, why not use the canned one or the puree or the box one so that I can make that life a little bit easier? And the only ingredient in there is tomatoes. So it's a wonderfully nutritious choice. At the same time, when things are packaged like that, like tomatoes, they were picked at prime season in the summer, and then they were packaged and put to use for later. So it's a great choice. All right, so I see some questions coming through the chat here. I'm going to try to answer them as we get to, as we start talking about the actual recipe. All right, so I'm going to show you here. All right, there we go. So here I have my ground turkey. So when you're making this recipe, I did a little extra steps here. So I took my onion, I sauteed that in a little bit of the oil. And then once that was like lightly browning, I took my ground turkey, and I use lean ground turkey. So I think it was 95% lean, 90% lean also works. And I crumbled it and cooked it until it was all the way through. So there's no more pink parts there. And then once you've done that, let's see if I can get the camera angle a little better. There you go. All right. So once you've done that, it's time to season it. So this is cooked all the way through. Now I'm going to take my seasonings. Now this is to taste. I'm making this, for my sons also, so I don't make it too spicy, but I have in here, I have my salt, cumin, chipotle chili powder mixture, and I'm going to season. This would be the time you would season the meat. So I'm going to dump that in here. I'm gonna give that a nice stir. And if you like things super spicy, add more cumin, especially chili powder. If you don't, then don't add that in. Then I have here tons of baby bello mushrooms, which you could use, which is basically a portobello mushroom trimmed down, made smaller. So I chop those up. I have my baby bello mushrooms, which are going to give my chili a really nice meaty flavor, as well as the rest of what's called your mirepoix, which is your carrots and celery. It's a good way to start any soup or stew is with a mirepoix, which is carrots, celery, and onion. And we had the onion in there. I like to saute my onion first because I think it gives it a little bit more flavor. So at this point, I mix it all up here. And I'm going to just dump everything else in. What I love about making chilies is that you can use up whatever vegetable or soup, actually, whatever vegetable in your refrigerator is kind of like almost at its end or like not quite its best, or just you have too much of and you can dump it in and wilt it down. So I'm going to dump in now my tomatoes, and there are lots of ways to make chili. You can make chili with what's called a white chili, and that would be without tomatoes. My personal favorite is with tomatoes. That's how we're going to do it this way. And they're also loaded with antioxidants and lycopene, which is great for reducing reduction of prostate cancer risk. But all of these nutritious vegetables have tons of antioxidants in, and the more color, the better. Now I'm going to take my canned pumpkin, and I'm going to mix that in there. Canned pumpkin is one of the richest vegetables in terms of vitamin A, which is a powerful antioxidant. And this is, as I mentioned, a great way to bring nutrition into your dish without adding the liquid that you need for this dish, without adding a ton of salt or adding alcohol or anything like that. All right, so now that I have that well mixed and incorporated, I'm going to dump in my black beans. I prefer black beans. You really could use anything. You could use kidney beans, you could use pinto beans, you could use chickpeas if you prefer, anything that you want. You're gonna mix all of that in. And now I'm using a Dutch oven. So I'm just gonna let this simmer on my stove. But if you weren't, this would be the time where you could transfer it to the slow cooker and let it simmer all day while you're at work. Just gonna turn that on and let it cook. I love them smelling it all day. Excellent. All right, so let me see some of these questions. We have in here, the safest way to cook food should be more cancer safe. Can air frying cause some of the foods to be carcinogenic? Okay, that's a great question. So when it comes to grilling, that's when you see the carcinogens forming in the meat in terms of like on a charcoal grill or when you're grilling outside, when you have that burned pieces, those are the pieces when you are increasing your risk of carcinogen intake. Air frying, to my knowledge, does not, I've never experienced that. How many seeds per day is okay? Okay, so that's a good question too. So when you think portion of seeds, you think what fits in the palm of one hand. And a portion, say, of like, you know, if those are, that's your main fat source for the day, our percentage of calories should be about 25% from fat. So if you're having, you know, not a lot of other oils or avocados or things like that, having a couple of palmfuls of seeds is a wonderful thing to include in your diet. This program will be recorded and the link will be sent out to you. So yes, if you missed any part of it, you will receive a link for that later. Vegetable oil is considered a healthy oil. Canola oils, anything that comes from a plant is considered to be a healthy oil per the American Cancer Society. I found canned tomatoes that are labeled low or no salt, has an artificial taste. So while I can't suggest brands, I would suggest to you looking for ones that are more in the organic realm and choose canned tomatoes that have no other ingredients in them. I also really prefer the boxed tomatoes. I find that they don't have as much ingredients or aftertaste as the canned. All right, so this is another good question. The pumpkin and the chili, does it add a lot of pumpkin flavor? So here's an interesting question. Pumpkin itself doesn't actually have any flavor. The pumpkin that we experience and grown to know and love is from pumpkin spice. So that's from a blend of nutmeg and ginger and cinnamon. The actual pumpkin, if you've ever tasted pumpkin that comes out of the can, it doesn't really have a whole lot of taste. So with everything else we have going on in the chili, you can't taste it at all, which I also love it for if you have kids at home or grown-ups at home that don't love to eat vegetables. This is another great way to boost your nutritional profile. All right. Let's move on a little bit and we'll get to some more questions later. Sorry about that, technical issue. Okay, here we go. Okay, recommendation 2, healthy eating pattern does not include, so we talked about everything that it does include. It does not include red and processed meats. What does that mean? We're going to talk about that. Sugar sweetened beverages, highly processed foods, and refined grain products. Those are a lot of buzzwords, so let's break it down here. So red and processed meats. When we talk about red or processed meats, we're talking about beef and pork. Pork is considered to be a red meat, despite what people want to hear. Pork is considered to be a red meat, and you want to use those sparingly. That means I recommend, if you're really trying to be good, once a month, maybe not as often as that, but definitely limiting it to no more than once a week, and avoiding processed meats. So processed meats mean bacon, sausages, deli meats, things like that, because they significantly increase your risk for intaking nitrates, which have been associated with many different types of cancers. So even if it is turkey bacon, even if it is turkey sausage, or even some of the vegan ones, believe it or not, are loaded with nitrates, and the nitrates are what are associated with the increased cancer risk. So you want to really limit and avoid processed meats and deli meats as much as humanly possible and substitute in other things. limiting added sugars. So I recommend that versus just the American Cancer Society's recommendation of limiting the overwhelming just sugar sweetened beverages, right? I think it should all be looped together. Added sugars are the addition of sugar to a food, right? So when you have sugar added to a baked good, or if you have something that's sweetened with honey or maple syrup, or anything that has sugar listed on the ingredients, and there are tons of words that mean sugar. At the end of this, a little bit, we're going to play a game to help you answer some of these questions and learn a little bit more. But I would say that limiting any sugar foods, baked goods, candies, ice creams, desserts, anything that has sugar in it. So you'd be surprised, like some canned tomato sauces, like jarred tomato sauce has sugar in it. Granola bars, yogurts, things like that. There's tons of sugar added into it, and words that don't even sound like the word sugar, like barley malt, for example, is a type of sugar. So you want to choose unsweetened versions of items whenever you can and sweeten it yourself. We're going to do that today with our dessert bowls, and buy plain yogurt and add honey to sweeten it yourself so you can really control it, or reduce the amount of granola bars that you're purchasing. And instead, if you can, make your own granola or substitute it with a lower reduced healthier bar that has, say, only nuts and dried fruit mixed into it, and use other things to make it taste sweeter. So cinnamon, vanilla bean, cocoa powder, even coffee, incorporating those flavors can really help to enhance the sweetness without adding a lot of additional sugars. I see a question coming through about other sugars. I am a big proponent, as I've said in many of my classes here, of natural. So while it is considered perfectly safe to have things like sugar, artificial sweeteners, I, as a dietitian, do not recommend them. Even ones like Truvia or other brands such as those were considered to be more natural. I recommend whenever possible to use natural sweeteners such as honey or maple syrup. There is some association between aspartame and cancer risk per the American Cancer Society. So you really want to, whenever possible, in my opinion, stick to natural and avoid the chemicals. Limit highly processed foods and refined grains. So what does that mean? Refined grains means basically anything made with white flour. So white flour, meaning white bread, white product pancakes, mixes, pastas, things like that. And instead, what I would focus on is how can I have the whole grain version of any of those, or have a natural whole grain instead of a processed grain. Highly processed foods. So this is what I was alluding to when I was talking about the pumpkin and the canned tomatoes. Foods that do not resemble their original plant or animal sources. So things like, for example, there are a lot of products on the market, even healthy ones, that have taken chickpeas or cauliflower and broken them down and incorporated them into chips or cheesy puffs or things like that. No matter what the marketing says, that is not the same as eating a piece of cauliflower or a chickpea. So you want to stick to foods that are in its original form as much as humanly possible. Now, we all make choices and have dessert every now and then, or have our favorite packaged food, or send our kids to school with packaged snacks. And none of that should ever be something that we feel guilty about, or feel any sorts of ill feelings about. I'm a firm believer in not feeling guilty about food choices, but the majority of our foods should be whole and unprocessed to reduce our risk of cancer. And you want to save those other things for a special treat. And just always think to yourself, I want to have the best bang for my bite in everything I put into my body. Every time I eat, it is an opportunity for more nutrition. So how can I make whatever I'm putting into my body more nutrient rich, have more vitamins and minerals, be more natural? Because if I'm putting it into my body, that's the one chance I have to keep it healthy. And I got one body, can't replace it, right? So the more nutrient rich each bite is, the better off you will be and feel more energy and reduce your risk of chronic disease. I see somebody put in here air fried cauliflower. It's like candy. It is delicious. I also like air fried chickpeas. They're like a crunchy substitute for potato chips. Those are also awesome. All right, let me go back and see if there are any other questions in here. Ground poultry has a gritty texture sometimes. Sometimes if it's not made well, or sometimes ground bones can get in there. And really check to see where you're purchasing it from, and the butcher that you're using, or the grocery store that you're purchasing it from, because it shouldn't be that way. All right, let's see if there are any other questions in the Q&A here. Oh, here's a good question. How does one combat gas when transitioning to plant and whole grain based diets? A really good question. You start slowly. So you don't want to go 0 to 60. If you've never eaten really fruits and vegetables, or you don't have a really high fibrous diet, you need to go really slow. So start with one meal at a time, slowly transitioning and incorporating it in, and drinking plenty of water. If you increase fiber, you have to increase water. Otherwise, it can also lead to constipation, which none of us want. So you really want to make sure that you go very slowly and see, maybe a huge bowl of broccoli isn't for you, but you do really well with, sauteed spinach and mushrooms and onions, for example. So you really, really, really want to start slowly. All right. Let's move on to make sure we get through everything. Okay, recommendation 3. Sorry, it's best not to drink alcohol per the American Cancer Society. Alcohol has been increased to increase your risk of cancers, including mouth, throat, larynx, esophageal, liver, colon, rectal, and breast cancers. That is hard and fast rule from American Cancer Society: no more than 1 drink per day for women and no more than 2 drinks per day for men. A standard size drink, so you can think equivalent in your head. It's not just whatever you can pour into your glass. A standard drink from their recommendation standpoint would be considered 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces or a shot of 80 proof liquor. All right, so let's move on to our second here. Why can't men drink more? The research has shown that, why can men drink more? Research has shown that 1 drink per day for women and 2 drinks per day for men is the threshold for increasing cancer risk. So unfortunately, that's the case. All right, here. So I'm going to start with our apple dessert bowls, which again is a really great seasonal, yummy. If I could like pass the smell on to you, I wish I could, because it smells so fragrant in here, the cinnamon, the nutmeg, and everything in between. So we're going to start with, and this is to serve 2 bowls, a sweet apple that you are going to dice. I leave the skin on. Now, there was a question that came through in the registration about washing produce, which I think is a really good question, and pesticide use. So it's recommended when you come home from the grocery store for most fruits and vegetables that don't perish upon washing right away, such as berries. Now, I'm not referring to berries, but things like apples. If you soak it in a solution of a teaspoon of baking soda with a couple of cups of water, that helps to reduce the pesticides from the skin. And then eat the skin, because it's loaded with fiber, and that's where all the nutrition is. So in this recipe, we core and dice the apple and leave the skin on. I'm going to mix it with a tablespoon of pure maple syrup, a little bit of water, the raisins and the cinnamon, and the nutmeg. And you're going to let that simmer on the stove for 15 minutes. I'm going to tilt my screen down. And when you do, you get a delicious apple recipe, cooked apples, almost like a baked apple. And you could probably do this in the oven too, but I think it's more delicious when you do this on the stovetop. You get like a syrupy taste with it, and we have really nice texture. And so after about 15 minutes, it starts to look like this. It is cooked down. If you don't like raisins, omit the raisins. You could probably also do this with pear, and it would be really, really delicious. Same thing. But I've cooked this down. I now have my plain Greek yogurt, and I put it in a fancy wine glass. Now, why do I do that? Dessert is special. And as we're talking about here, reducing overall intake of sugar, you want to feel and enjoy and practice mindfully eating this dessert because it is a special thing and you want to really enjoy the experience. So why not make it more luxurious? I always say that, you know, we don't, especially for those of us who have been at home more the past couple of years, why not use our nice dishes and our nice china, especially when it comes to dessert. And this is a really nice way to serve it for presentation, but why not do it for yourself also? So you have a little bit of the plain, I'm using 2% Greek yogurt here. And I have my 2 different glasses, and this is about half a cup each in each of this. You could use plain yogurt. It doesn't have to be Greek. I prefer the 2%. I think a little bit of fat gives it makes it a little more satisfying. And I'm going to take my apples and I'm going to put that on top here. I wouldn't recommend whole milk product for the yogurt, but 2% is wonderful. So I'm going to top my apples equally on both. And this was 1 apple that I cut down, and I'm now dividing it into 2 glasses. Apparently I can't scoop and talk at the same time. So I am putting that evenly here, and I'm using a little bit of the liquid because that's going to mix with my Greek yogurt and give me even more cinnamon flavor. So I have in here, I'm using almonds because I prefer almonds, but you could use walnuts, you could use pecans. If you're allergic to nuts, you could use pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds or nothing. You don't have to have the nuts, but I think it gives it a little more something extra. And then I have toasted oatmeal. The toast, you don't have to toast it. You don't even have to have the oatmeal, but I think it's really nice to have that extra whole grain in here. And when you toast it, it gives it something special. This would be a beautiful dish to include for Thanksgiving, or if you're hosting people safely for a fall dinner party, or just like it's just fun and special. Like I would eat this for a weeknight special dessert, and look how beautiful that is. Look how beautiful that is. Would definitely think of it as like a special dessert parfait. And so some of you are asking about the chili. Well, that takes about an hour on the stove to cook. I, of course, through the magic of TV, some of you who know me very well know that I, of course, have a finished product for you to see. So we have here the chili. You see it's cooked down. You'll see it a lot better once I put it into the white bowl. It's cooked down, and I'd say about a cup is a portion. Right? So you see how the pumpkin has given it like a beautiful, rich orange color here. There is a hardiness to the vegetables, that everything is cooked down. The colorful vegetables give it like lots of things to look at, as well as the tomatoes are going to give it a lot of flavor. Has a lot of fragrant cumin and chili powder, not a lot of salt to season it. We're seasoning it with fresh, wonderful spices. And I would serve this and eat this just like this. We have, you know, starchy vegetable. Starchy vegetable from the pumpkin, legumes, and the black beans, and the turkey chili for some protein, and lots of vegetables, the peppers, the mushrooms, the carrots, the celery, the onion, have all cooked down to make this delicious hearty meal. And I think the 2 of these together make a delicious, delicious option. When you are serving it to kids, there was a question that came through about that. When you're serving it to kids, I like to put it, to make it easier, I take like little tortilla chips and I'll put it like in a little tortilla chip as like a little bite. Sometimes they'll just eat it out of the bowl also because it's so beautiful. But if you want to make it cute, or if you want to have it as like an appetizer for something you're serving, put it in like a little chip, especially the ones that are like scoop shaped. And then it's like a really delicious bite. So I think there are lots of ways, but I am not a firm, I don't believe in kid food and adult food. I just believe in food. So while you can make the portions smaller or maybe like change it up a little bit in the presentation to make it easier to eat, my children will be eating both of these things. So both of these things will be part of their meal today, since they have made it first day. Toasting the oatmeal, how do you toast it? So you take the oatmeal on a very baking sheet, like evenly spread out in an even layer, toast it in the oven for about 5 to 7 minutes or until you smell it. And then that's it, turn it off. So you don't want it to burn. So make sure you're watching it. Start with 5 minutes. I think it's about 375, I said, or 350 for the recipe. And cut it off as soon as you smell it, because it'll start to burn. Definitely have done that many a times. All right, so let me see. I think I got to all the questions. I have some polls here. Oh, I've been sharing that the whole time. I wish somebody had told me. All right, here. So let's try this one. This is a fun one. Which of the following is considered one alcoholic drink? 1.5 ounces of tequila, 8 ounces of wine, 2 ounces of scotch, or 12 ounces of beer. Question coming through as that's going, do you suggest swapping out sweet potatoes for white potatoes for nutritional value? So white potatoes get a really bad reputation. They're very high in potassium and lots of nutrients. I say both. Sweet potatoes are of a wonderful nutrient profile that are different from white potatoes. So while I don't recommend French fries for either of those things as an everyday nutritious choice, both potatoes I cook in my house. All right, let's see. All right, so this is a little bit of a tricky one. And I think there was an error here, so I apologize. The answer is 1.5 ounces of tequila and 12 ounces of beer. 8 ounces is too much wine. It's 5 ounces is recommended by the American Heart Association, American Cancer Society. 2 ounces of scotch would be too much. So the answer could have been either 1.5 ounces of tequila or 12 ounces of beer. It should have said multiple choice. I apologize for that. All right, so let's see here. Other questions. Okay, true or false? Pork is considered to be a red meat. Let's see who was paying attention. And I see here my preferred cookware. So I go restaurant style. I like stainless steel cookware. I like stainless steel cookware that I can control, that I can really take a beating. I don't use a lot of I don't use a lot of other types of cookware. I use it's called Dutch oven. I love my Dutch oven. That can also really take a beating as well. I do have some nonstick, but I don't really use a lot of nonstick. I use stainless steel cookware because that's how I can really cook and clean it well and put it through the dishwasher. All right, so let's see this here. Share the results. The audience, great, you were paying attention. 95% true, and that is correct. Pork is considered to be a red meat. All right, this is a cool one. Sandwich substitutions. Great sandwich substitutes instead of deli meat are nut and seed butters, grilled chicken, hummus, cheese, and avocado, or all of the above. What would be considered great substitutes for deli meat? Let's see what everybody says. And I think there is another question here. Should we use red onion instead of white because they have more nutrients? So similar to my sweet potato question, white onions have a lot of nutrition too. So use both. Definitely use both. All right, so let's see here. Gonna end this poll. Share results. All of the above. Excellent. Nuts and seed butters are wonderful for sandwiches. Grilled chicken is a great substitute for deli meat because it is an unprocessed meat. It's a great substitution. Hummus, cheese, and avocado, also a good substitution because it's more on the vegetarian end of the spectrum, especially if it's just hummus and avocado. All of the above is the correct answer. All right, so now last question of the day. last of my questions of the day. Sugar, words that mean sugar include, right? Check all that apply. Barley malt, cane juice crystals, dextrose, brown rice syrup. What do you guys think? Which of these words mean sugar? Yes, it says you can only choose one. I think there was a little bit of error on Zoom. I apologize there. Somehow when I made my polls, I think there was a little bit of a technical glitch, but it was supposed to be multiple choice. I apologize. Sometimes there are tech errors. Let's see. So it looks like you're all over the map, and that's good because all of those words mean sugar. There's a list of like 40 different words that mean sugar on the American Cancer Society's website, but all of those are real things that people actually include in food products, believe it or not. And they do that because the way ingredients are listed on a food label is in dominance of weight. So when you spread it out and have lots of different types of sugar, you can mix it in throughout the list of ingredients. And when you do that, you can hide it. Food manufacturers' goals is to make money. So their goal is not to keep you healthy. That's my goal. That's not their goal. So you want to, if they just listed sugar versus all the different types of sugar, it would be the #1 ingredient, right? So you want to be an informed consumer, definitely an informed consumer. And there was just a question coming through as well, asking me about sugar recommendations. So I actually prefer the American Heart Association sugar recommendations for a limitation because they are the most stringent. And it is, once again, there's a discrepancy between men and women. 9 teaspoons per day for men, or the equivalent of 36 grams or 150 calories of sugar per day for men. And then women, it's 6 teaspoons or 24 grams and 100 calories. So you want to put that in perspective. When you think about a can of Coke, can of soda, it's about 8 teaspoons of sugar or 32 grams. So you're way over that, your limit for women, and you're almost there for men. So let me just see if there are any other questions here. All right, vegans like to use oil. I'm not as familiar with that. There might be different types of oil, but it's just a healthier lifestyle to not use a ton of oil in your cooking. But I've never seen that vegans not liking to use any oil whatsoever. It's definitely a part of vegan cooking that you can incorporate plant-based sources. All right, and I see some kudos in the chat. Thank you so much for joining me today. Oh, I see one more question. I will answer that about coconut oil. So coconut oil is, from American Cancer Society's perspective, and this class is about the American Cancer Society's recommendations. It's a plant-based oil. It shouldn't be your dominant oil, but it's perfectly fine to use in moderation. My last class on heart disease, from a heart disease perspective, it's not the best choice because it's loaded with saturated fat, which has been shown to increase your risk of heart disease, even though it's from plant-based sources. So choosing it less often is totally okay. Canola oil is totally okay. I want to thank you all for joining me. There will be a brief survey that pops up on your screen as soon as this webinar closes. Please, please, please fill it out. It really helps us to have a best experience for you and continue to provide education to our community. This program will be recorded and the link will be sent out to you later. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, have a wonderful day.